This supplemental presentation is on terrorism and religious violence. Recall our discussion of violence and the various forms that it takes. In many ways, terrorism can involve all forms of violence that we discussed. In particular, we can see in the war on terror over the past 14 years a kind of spiral of violence that keeps perpetuating itself, from Al-Qaeda to the Islamic State, to the use of war drones and other forms of repression. So what is terrorism? Here are a few definitions that groups and individuals have put forward over the years. Systematic use or threatened use of violence to intimidate a population or government and thereby affect political, religious, or ideological change. The unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, civilian population, or any segment in furtherance of political or social objectives. Premeditated, politically motivated violence against innocents. Calculated use of unlawful violence to inculcate fear intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies in pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. Terror is nothing other than prompt, severe, inflexible justice. Terrorism sprouts from the existence of aggrieved groups. You notice there are different ideas here. A definition that I favor is this one. Terrorism is synthesis of war and theater, a dramatization of the most prescribed kind of violence, that which is perpetrated on innocent victims, played before an audience in the hope of creating a mood of fear for political purposes. It's hard not to look at 9/11 and see how this definition plays out. What is terrorism, though? How do we understand it? Is it a deliberate strategy, rational, or form of political action? It seems to be so. Is it an example of psychological malfeasance, irrational, a venting of anger or resentment? There's truth in that. Is it a war or a crime? Terrorists see a war. Victims see a crime. To understand this, let's look at various elements. First, the method or result. Most people would agree that terrorism includes violence. What about threats of violence? Kidnapping, arson, rape. What if no one's harmed? Is it still violence? Second is the perpetrator. Who carries out terrorism? Is terrorism always carried out by organized opposition groups? Can states be terrorists? Can individuals? What about lone wolves? Third is the target. Does terrorism target only civilians? Could an attack on a military target be terrorism? How do you decide what a civilian is? What about off-duty military personnel? Colonial occupiers? What about the assassination of the head of the state, one of whose roles is commander-in-chief? To qualify as terrorism, must perpetrators of an act of violence deliberately target civilians, or simply be reckless as to whether civilians as well as military targets might be harmed? Are drone strikes acts of terror? Are all attacks on civilians terrorism? Is the target of terrorism always human, or can acts of sabotage against property also be considered terrorism? Fourth comes the motive. Is the motive behind an act important in deciding whether it's terrorism, or should only the act itself be considered? What's the objective of terrorism? Is terrorism violence for an audience, an act committed to inspire fear in the public and therefore force policy changes? Or does a terrorist act have specific strategic objectives? Does it make any difference if the perpetrators consider themselves martyrs for a religious or political cause? Fifth is the point of view. If a cause is considered legitimate, are any means to achieve its goals legitimate? How does one distinguish between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? What's the difference between terrorism and guerrilla warfare? Is terrorism the weapon of the weak? Are illegitimate acts against an enemy in war terrorism, war crimes, or is there even a difference? Does history change the definition of terrorism? If a group achieves independence using tactics called terrorists by their previous occupier or sovereign, making their rebellion into a war of independence, are they justified by their eventual success in becoming a state? What's the connection between religion and violence that so many people now put forward? Is religion an unwilling accomplice, or is it a resource for extremists? We can find examples of both. There's a long history where religions have sanctioned violence to protect or promote sectarian interests. Just think historically of the Crusades. What about the wars between Catholics and Protestants, Christians and Muslims, Sunnis and Shia? If we're honest, we have to note that there are many religious symbols in text that reflect, even invite, violence. It's hard to look at a crucifix and not see an act of violence. We can identify some common features between religion and terrorism. In truth, in many ways, religious terrorism is like religion as a cultural system. Religious terrorism as a cultural system provides meaning and order for people to legitimate their actions and feel that what they are doing is somehow in keeping with their religious frameworks, even though others of the same religion would disagree. There is a symbolic purpose to religious terrorism. Religion provides legitimation for religious terrorists with a particular view of the world, relationships with each other, and gets support in particular social structures. Part of that worldview includes the dualistic understanding of the forces in the world. It's a battle of good versus evil. They are on the side of the good, or God. The world stage is seen as the backdrop for this battle between these forces, a cosmic war, so to speak. Those on the side of good are righteous. Those on the side of the evil are not even worthy of consideration. Often that worldview is captured symbolically. Osama seeing the U.S. as the great Satan, President Bush referring to the axis of evil. Part of the ethos is some of the ways relating and behaving in relationship with one another that are both supported by and further that particular worldview. If the world is a battlefield, then all you have are friends and enemies can be treated with impunity. The culture of death is part of that treatment. There's a kind of transcendent moralism. There's a moral presumption and internal conviction that one is right in doing these violent acts. The social structures, churches, temples, mosques, reinforce the worldview and provide monetary support for the terrorist acts, supply religious instruction so that people can see what they're doing as noble acts on behalf of God, and supply ritual acts that prepare them for their actions and burial rites as martyrs should they die in the act. The terrorists get legitimation or a stamp of approval from an ideology that was taught by an authority one respects. These communities also see themselves as under attack, as being violated, and they are only responding to the violence they experience. These views are considered valid by the people in the communities, regardless of whether or not outsiders agree. We can certainly see some common features between religion and terrorism. Both are theatrical and need an audience. Both engage in ritual and deal in symbolism. Both place an aura of ultimacy around their behavior. Agendas are given a cosmic dimension. Both extol the virtues of the struggle itself. Religion provides courage to those who face the possibility of death, assurance of afterlife, martyrdom, a form of sacrifice. Religion can be a source of power for good, but can intensify dangerous behavior. Sacrifice involves violence, includes our own religion, not just that of others. How do we counteract such terrorism? Are there resources within religions to do this? Many think so. If we're going to move in this direction, we need to decrease the sources of resentment. Do they have a point? Are we causing such resentment? What can we do to eliminate it? This gets at ending the spiral by eliminating injustice. We need to talk to our enemies, hear what they are saying, learn from it. We can't ignore them and hope they'll go away or try to bomb them into oblivion. We need to take positive initiatives, not simply war diplomacy based on the threat of force. In truth, our efforts in Afghanistan to rebuild are steps in the right direction. Justice, that means fair treatment for all persons, and this includes those with whom we disagree. We have to live with some level of risk. We have to accept diversity and tolerate differences, but not just tolerate them, need to engage them, so at least understand in a better sense than we do now. We need forgiveness and reconciliation, a kind of restorative framework of redemption. This is where religions can play a crucial role. And we need to rethink power as servanthood rather than dominance. The latter plays God. The former acknowledges humanity. Here's one example of someone using poetry to try to help people move past the war mentality.
piece tonight for my brothers, Samih and Ahmad Hamad. It is a revision of first writing since. There have been no words, no poetry in ashes south of Canal, no prose in trucks driving debris and DNA. Evident out my window in abstract reality, sky where once was steel, smoke where once was flesh. Please, God, let it be a mistake, the pilot's heart, the plane's engine. God, please, don't let it be anyone who looks like my brothers. I don't know how bad a life has to break in order to kill. I've never been so hungry that I willed hunger. Never so angry as to want a gun over a pen. Not really. Even as a woman, a Palestinian, never this broken. Ricardo on radio said in his accent thick as yucca, I will feel so much better when the first bombs drop over there. A woman crying in a car parked and stranded in hurt, I offered comfort, a hand she did not see before she said, we're gonna burn them so bad. My hand went to my head, and my head to the dead Iraqi children, the dead in Nicaragua, in Rwanda, who vied with fake sport wrestling for America's attention. People saying this was bound to happen, let's not forget U.S. transgressions. Hold up, I live here. These are my friends and fam. Me in those buildings, and we're not bad people. Do not support America's bullying. Can I just have half a second to feel bad? Thank you, woman, who saw me drinking cool and blinking tears, opened her arms before she asked, do you want a hug? Big white woman, and her embrace only people with flesh can offer. My brothers in the Navy, I said, and we're Arabs. Wow, you got double trouble. Word. One more person asked me if I knew the hijackers. One more motherfucker asked me what Navy my brother is in. One more person assumed no Arabs or Muslims were killed. Assume they know me, or that I represent a people, or that a people represent an evil, or that evil is as simple as a flag and words on a page. We did not vilify white men when McVeigh bombed Oklahoma. Give out his family's address or church, or blame the Bible or Pat fucking Robertson. Networks air footage of Palestinians dancing in the street. No apology that hungry children are bribed with sweets that turn their teeth brown. Correspondents edit images. Archives facilitate lazy journalism. And when we talk about holy books, hooded men, and death, why never mention the KKK? If there are any people on earth who understand how New York is feeling right now, they are in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Bush has waged war on a man once openly funded by the CIA. I've read too many books to believe what I'm told. I don't give a fuck about bin Laden. His vision of the world don't represent me or those I love. But I've signed petitions for years to out the U.S.-sponsored Taliban. Shit is complicated, and I don't know what to think. But I know who will pay. Women, mostly colored and poor, will have to bury children, support themselves through grief. In America, it will be those amongst us who refuse blanket attacks on the shivering, who work towards social justice and opposing hateful policies. Either you are with us or with the terrorists, meaning keep your people under control and resistance censored, meaning we got the loot and the nukes. Never felt less American and more Brooklyn than these days. These stars and stripes represent the dead as citizens first, not family, not lovers. My skin is real thin, my eyes are darker, the future holds little light. My baby brother is a man now, on alert, praying 5 times a day. The orders he will take are righteous, and not weigh his soul down from the afterlife. Both my brothers, my heart stops, not a beat disturbs my fear. Muslim, gentle men, born in Brooklyn, and their faces are of the Arab man, all eyelashes and nose and beautiful color and stubborn hair. What will their lives be like now? Over there is over here. Across the river, burning rubber and limbs. Rescuers traumatized. Skyline brought back to human size, no longer taunting gods. I cried when I saw those buildings collapse on themselves like a broken heart. I have never owned pain that needs to spread like that. There is no poetry in this. Causes and effects, symbols and ideologies, mad conspiracy here. Information we'll never know. There is death here, and promises of more. There is life here. Anyone hearing this is breathing, maybe hurting, but breathing for sure. If there is any light to come, it will shine from the eyes of those who look for peace and justice after the rubble and rhetoric are cleared and the phoenix has risen. Affirm life, affirm life. We got to carry each other now. You are either with life or against it. Affirm life.
Pretty powerful. A few years ago, I was asked to preach a sermon on Valentine's Sunday. The text was about love and love for enemies. I wondered aloud what it would be like to draw from the Christian tradition to open up a dialogue with Osama bin Laden. Here's the Valentine I wrote. Osama, your name evokes strong passions of anger, contempt, revenge, and hate. Those same emotions inflamed your brethren, flying headlong into heaven's gate. Respect is what you asked of the world for justice, for Islam, your faith, your culture. Holy war, smart bombs, mortars, torture, weapons each employ create such rupture. Loneliness now your constant companion, cut off and hiding only God knows where. Is there no hope for our redemption? Must our paths end only in despair? Violence, yours, ours, not the answer. Hatred's fires forge a hardened heart. The aftermath is just more repression, a wedge that drives us further apart. Can love end this war between us? Love's prayer for enemies bridge this breach? Will it turn our swords into plowshares, or is the break beyond love's reach? Please take the olive branch love offers, a heartfelt prayer for hostility to cease, and dreams of the day will sit together, wolf and lamb, in love's embrace of peace. Of course, the answer to this was no. The solution was what is often referred to as redemptive violence, killing him and feeling justified in what we've done. The video on the myth of redemptive violence will give you a sense of that if you haven't already seen it. We felt justified in killing him. It's one of Obama's legacies. But have we learned at all the ways to move past the terror that we perpetrate or the world perpetrates against us? I'm not sure. Given the current efforts to crush ISIS and all the sympathizers, it doesn't look good.